In 1982, a workman was clearing a pond when he unearthed a staggering hoard of human remains. On the outskirts of a small city on the Florida coast, a backhoe is churning up the ground. Suddenly, the operator hits something solid buried beneath the earth. Unbeknownst to him, he's on the brink of one of the most amazing archaeological discoveries ever made in the United States. In 1982, Steve Vanderyak was employed to help with the construction of a new housing development just outside of Titusville, Florida, known as Windover Farms. The plans required a road to be built across a pond, and Vanderyak was put to work operating a backhoe to clear the area. Located in between the major tourist destinations of Cape Canaveral and Disney World, the new development was sure to be a popular site. However, a spanner was soon thrown into the works, albeit one that would change history. In fact, Vanderyak's backhoe ran up against various solid objects while he excavated the pond. So, puzzled by the frequent occurrence of what he took to be rocks, he got out of the vehicle to take a closer look. Vanderyak then picked up a large, round object that had lodged itself in the bucket of his excavator. What's more, wiping off the peaty soil, he realized that he was holding a human skull, and nearby he found more evidence of human remains. Consequently, developer Jim Swan called a halt to work on the construction site and brought in the authorities to get to the bottom of the mystery. Furthermore, the local medical examiner soon realized that the remains were not those of modern murder victims, but instead something far older. Accordingly, specialists from the Florida State University were brought in to examine the finds. Archaeologist Glenn Duran studied the bones and determined that they were in fact of Native American origin and could possibly be up to 1,000 years old. Intrigued by the discovery, the company in charge of developing the site then funded radiocarbon dating of the bones. But when experts received the results, they were amazed by what they revealed. In fact, Duran's estimates had been a little off the mark. According to the test, the bones were actually between 7,000 and 8,000 years old. Yes, they were the remains of humans who had walked the earth 2,000 years before the Egyptian pyramids were built. Recognizing the importance of these finds, the development company then changed its plans and left the pond undisturbed. Then, 2 years later, funding was secured to fully excavate the site. However, the pond presented some unique challenges. The bodies were submerged in as much as 10 feet of water. Hence, in order to get to them, archaeologists would have to drain the pond, while still keeping the peat moist enough to preserve the fragile remains. Eventually, the problem was overcome when the team dug a series of wells at the pond. Each well was connected to a pipe that allowed the water to be sucked out from underneath. This enabled huge quantities of water to be removed every day and consequently allowed the archaeologists to access the peat layers below. What the team uncovered was staggering. From 1984 to 1986, 3 separate digs took place at the site. And over the course of those 2 years, the skeletons of 168 individuals were recovered from the pond. Almost all the bodies were arranged identically, lying in the fetal position on their sides, while their heads pointed towards the west. In addition, they were pinned to the bottom of the pond by wooden stakes, a process which experts believe prevented them from rising to the surface. By studying the remains, archaeologists were subsequently able to draw some fascinating conclusions about these early humans and their lives in pre-Columbian Florida. It's believed that they formed part of a hunter-gatherer society, although the large amounts of burials discovered in one place suggest they were not always on the move. And there was more. In contrast to many of the preserved bog bodies found elsewhere in the world, most of the remains uncovered in the Windover site were those of people who appeared to have died of natural causes. Experts believe that the location was used as a cemetery where the dead were respectfully buried, rather than it simply having been a convenient place in which to dispose of bodies. Interestingly too, the gender balance in the cemetery was pretty much equal. While around 50% of the people interred were aged 20 or younger at the time of their deaths, some of the bodies, however, belonged to individuals who, when they died, were in their 70s, an impressive age for the time. Many of them were also wrapped in a fabric woven from native plants, the oldest of its kind ever found in the United States. Meanwhile, experts have found evidence that these early Floridians lived in a surprisingly empathetic society. For example, one skeleton belonged to a 50-year-old woman showed evidence of having suffered multiple broken bones several years prior to passing away. The fact that she lived on despite her crippling injuries implies that the community looked after her while she was stricken. In addition, the remains of a teenage boy suggested that he suffered from spina bifida, a lifelong disorder that would have rendered him almost completely dependent on others. The fact that he survived into young adulthood is more evidence that this society displayed a level of caring far greater than that which might be expected from an ancient community. There may be more to come from Windover as well. Although the finds have been incredibly illuminating, the story of these ancient burials is not yet finished. Hoping that future technology might be able to reveal even more about the bodies, Duran and his team have left around half the site intact. The site now looks just like any other Florida bog, he told the public broadcasting service. You'd never know anything was there. It's just invisible.